Hello and welcome to Epic Loot Radio. I'm your host, Brian. Joining me is Rory Khan, the legend, the master. And he thought of this as our show before the big reveal, the big launch of New World here on the 28th. Is serving this podcast as a way to help structure what do you need to know about this game. Like, this is a new MMORPG, triple A MMORPG. And so we thought we would structure the show with a bit of news, but a more informational podcast for you guys. So whether you're listening to us over the course of the weekend before launch, or all of a sudden you start hearing and seeing all these streamers play New World on the 28th, and you're wondering, is this game right for you? And that's going to be the focus of the show and the podcast today. So we thank you for joining us live. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and smash that like button if you get the opportunity. If you're listening into the MP3 audio, be sure to thank Luke, thank Chille. Let me pull up the rest of the list. I was less prepared today. John, Psycho, Cordell, WG Productions, and Keelan for their financial support, making this show a reality to bring to you guys each and every week. You can watch us live over on Ginger Gaming Radio or listen to wherever podcasts are found. Just search Epic Loot Radio and join in. Rory, how are you doing, man?
I am actually a little bit under the weather, but I'm gonna soldier on. It's been a bit of a tough week for me because I've had a couple of health flare-ups, but other than that, it's doing good. I've just as you might remember yesterday from Crystal Core, I just finished assembling brand new PC. After I assembled the last little bits yesterday, dude, it's running like clockwork and just in time for New World. Now, I didn't get it just to play New World because, I actually need a PC to work, and my PC was 6 years old, so it's getting a little bit long in the tooth. But yeah, doing pretty good. And I'm also curious to see what are all of the news and happenings around New World, because I've been following a couple of different topics here and there, and I've dropped just a little bit off of New World, but I'm still pretty hyped for the release next week. And I think that one of the first things that we need to cover, because, if someone is watching this and you've never heard Epic Loot Radio before, maybe you're just like trying to find information on New World and whatnot, what kind of game is New World? Because like you always have, action, combat, tap targeting, all that stuff. Naturally, New World goes more towards the action combat. I think I've already seen a lot of mainstream outlets going like, it's the Dark Souls of MMOs. And I'm just like, no, it's not.
Yeah. There's aspects of the combat that I think people really enjoy and that also can find frustrating. But the thing I immediately connect with, it is an action MMO. Yeah. You can equip up to 2 weapons, and they have up to, I think right now, 11 weapons at launch, if I'm remembering the numbers correctly, with more that we've already seen in games, in leaks to come. And so they're going to be rolling out weapons that really fundamentally change the sandbox of the game itself. We saw that happen all the through alpha. So at the this time last year, they had the preview, even less weapons. We ended up getting like 4 new weapons over the course of the year. So I don't even know if they'll keep with that pace, but they've already revealed 3 of the new weapons that we've seen: the Void Gauntlet, the daggers, and the Blunderbuss. And so weapons base themselves off of the different stats. So each stat that you have that you can choose to level in will benefit certain weapons or not. And don't worry, you can respec. And the higher level you are, obviously the bigger the cost of the respec itself. We can cover more of that in detail. But you could swap your weapons at any time, thus giving you a huge amount of flexibility in your build. And if you want to do something like a melee magic build, you actually can get gems that will help kind of, change your stat allocation so that you're not necessarily completely gimped in one category or the next. Now, the combat, I would say, isn't like, something where you would think near automata, but something automata. Where you're sitting here, just flying around all over. When you commit to an action, you're going to follow through. A lot of people wish there was some kind of animation cancel dodge, but that's not the case. Like, it is a PvE, PvP focus game, and combat is a little bit more strategic in that mind because you do commit to the action itself. And each weapon can hold up to 3 skills. So ultimately, 2 weapons, 6 skills total, and just run around and have a good time with it.
So this is a classless MMO, if you guys didn't get that from Brian's description, yes. Which means there is no classes. There's no like, oh, I want to play like a mage or whatever. No, you pick up a staff and you start shooting spells, and then you just equip armor that is relevant to that, and that's how you become a mage. And at any point in time, you can swap because like, oh, actually, I'm not vibing with the mage. Okay, well, equip an axe and now you're a warrior. Equip a musket and now you're something else. I'm actually curious because you said blunderbuss. Is that the same as the musket or is that a different weapon?
No, that's a new weapon that's going to be coming. And check it out. So,
dude.
So the musket is basing it's a lot of its damage off of dexterity. Blunderbuss has a little bit of dexterity, but it's going to be based off of strength. So if you actually want to have a warrior axe wielding shotgun, they're calling a shotgun, but that's what the
blunderbuss is. Shotgun. Yeah, blunderbuss is a shotgun.
But it's going to be a strength based ranged weapon, and we've seen it in game. Like it's not like I'm sitting here just making stuff up. We've seen this.
I'm a blunderbuss main. There you go. It's all there is to it.
A blunder main.
Blunder main.
I'm here to blunder, and I've already forgot my axe.
I do all of the blundering that you can possibly do, but yeah, that's pretty cool. I wasn't aware that there were new weapons again, so that's nice.
That's one of the things that I've talked about with this game itself is that New World is going to have its hype. They're integrated with Twitch, right? Here's like a key aspect if you're not aware. You can sync up your Twitch account, whether you're a streamer or not. If you're watching, you can get drops to your account by watching certain streamers on launch day, and they're going to have all of those events. Not everyone. In fact, actually, as they detailed it out, it was the main streamers who ended up participating in the Battle for New World. So just note, if you're curious, there's lists of them out there. We don't need to list them all off here. But
my boy Tally is in there, I think.
Yeah, I think he is. And so there's special weapons that you can watch via these drops. There's also Prime rewards. There's also, if you're streaming, your community can jump in. It is the first real test of a real AAA MMORPG genre integration with a streaming platform. Whether that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, keep it locked to the radio for more.
What are those drops going to be like? Are we talking like a couple of cosmetic skins? Cosmetics. Yeah, there's nothing.
Cosmetics. It's not pay to win. It's not pay for power. There are people who believe that it could eventually evolve into a pay to win game. But my counter to that is that any game can evolve into a pay to win game. Yeah. WoW is a pay to win game. Like if you break it down, and that's just the way it is.
I've mentioned that. I've gotten into so many arguments with people about that because they're like, well, technically speaking, I'm like, no, technically speaking, shut the hell up. It is a pay to win game. It is what it is. Like, you just need to accept it. I'm not telling you not to play it. Just like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But so with a classless system, do we have a holy trinity still?
So I think anything can easily be devolved into the holy trinity. Yes, you can build a healer. You can actually build a tank healer. Yes, you can, have classes that are going to specialize in damage. But with the classless system, the game doesn't have any kind of matchmaking, so it doesn't hard force you into those roles, right? Like any kind of trinity is going to be self-imposed by the player base. But there's the reason the trinity is so strong is because it's a system that makes fundamental sense. You want one person or a group of people that are going to have the enemy's attention because you want to have and be able to build out people who can focus in on damage. What I don't see a lot of currently in the game is a support class. And I think if they were able to have in more support focused jobs, like when I think about supports, I think from Final Fantasy XI's Bard and certain things that like really buff the party.
Buff like your damage.
Right. Now, I think with enough weapons and enough time, that could easily be introduced. And I think that would be something really exciting. Like I said, anytime they add a new weapon, because you can actually equip two weapons, it will fundamentally change the landscape, both for PvE and PvP.
You can pretty much think of each of the weapons as a subclass because in essence, that's what they are. And they're just mixing and matching different subclasses. So you can have like, sword and shield. This is like your, shield tank. And then you can swap to, but he also has a blunderbuss. So he's kind of like a shield tank, but at the same time, you can swap to range damage if he has to, which is pretty good.
Yeah. One thing I think that they could totally do a better job at, and I hope to see this in the future, is the ability to save like your classes and your setup as a loadout, right? Because Chille here says there's still classes in my head and that's just how I play. Well, that's right. Like it's classless, meaning that you have full control over it. What I would personally love to see is the ability to save my gear and my stats. And yes, if I want to change it up, give me, let me pay my fees, but then I can kind of build out these different options. They don't have that in the system yet, but that's going to be my constant feedback as a player of, hey, I have my mage build, and then, oh, you get online and you run a healer, and I want to go, okay, I'll come as a tank or something like that.
You know, an excellent way of doing that is just like you got glamour plates in 14. You could just have that. So like you would spend it the first time to make the glamour plate, but then you could swap at will, because that would enable you to just like have different builds at any point in time without having to constantly spend additional currency to change your playstyle.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, like this is the launch of a brand new MMO, and so I personally love this point in time. But if you're still on the fence, note that the first update, the second update, like that's going to be more telling to me as a player what Amazon's full investment. And they say they're fully in on this game for 10 years, but like just not to be a negative Nancy, but just to continue to be as honest as possible. Anthem said the same thing. Many games say the same thing. Like, Amazon has the funds to do it, and I believe they have the motivation to do it. What we'll find out soon is, will they do it? Like, words are words, actions are better.
I've never been a big fan of, you know, going into a project and their first thing is like, oh yeah, this game's going to be supported for 10 years. Like, no. Listen, support the game for the year that it comes out on, and then see how successful it is. Like, give us an experience that's worth it for, like, I don't know, 6 months to a year, and then think about if it's worth it to go any further. Like, leave that door open, but don't go like, oh yeah, 100%, 10 years, 10 years, dude, 100%. Yeah, it's not a problem.
Thank goodness that they're not actually doing that. Like, oh, the 10-year drum. You know, one of the problems that I've seen with a lot of that is that it's all promise, no, you know, all smoke, no action. But with the game itself, like, they're launching, I think, a really solid state. I've seen people make the argument that they need to delay and add more content. And that's the thing. It's like, this isn't a single player game. It's a game that will add more content and will add more content. And so as a player, like, this is a great time to get invested in a new world, to be able to get into the game. The fact that it has a player-driven economy would tell me, if you were asking if you should play on day one, I would say absolutely, because then you can actually have advantages over a player who comes in a year, because you'll have your crafting and your gathering, and you'll know more, and you'll be able to have more power over any kind of market than a player who wants to come in and try to, you know, like, oh, I'm going to, you know, like, hey, your investment today is going to pay out over the long run, especially in a player-driven economy scenario. So that would be essentially what I would propose to somebody who was like on the fence, because there is no sub, and here's the real kicker: no subscription. It's a buy-to-play game. So ultimately, if you decide you want to take a break, you want to go play another game, guess what? What are we playing on November 19th?
Yeah,
Final Fantasy. You know, like, Final Fantasy's got its next expansion, but I think that's a healthy mindset that New World's positioning itself with future updates to continue to invite players back in. And it could be a game that you main for a couple months and take a break from, and then come back with the next big update. And I think that's going to be real key to their success.
But at the end of the day, if people are still on the fence, I think that, look, the safest thing, wait for reviews. Like, I'm sure that me and Brian will be making videos talking about our experiences.
Yes.
And you can get like our opinions there, and then you can figure out whether or not you feel like this is going to be the game for you moving forward or not. Because at the end of the day, you know, we know that MMO launches tend to be pretty rocky. They're going to be pretty wild.
That's what I'm honestly, from a technology perspective, like as a programmer and somebody who's been in IT for a long time, every time we always see bad launch. Now, over the course of time, expansion has launches and they've improved. Square Enix is a real good example of that. Every expansion launch has only become smoother and smoother. So I hope Endwalker is going to kind of follow in its footsteps. But Amazon's betas have been incredibly smooth for me so far. They've had issues. They're betas. They seem to have tried to solve some of those issues. So and here's the thing, if Amazon has a smooth launch on Tuesday, then any launch of a service-based game, an online game, after that point will literally have an example of a smooth launch. Right now, the typical response is, what can you do? It's an online game. Online games always kind of launch with some problems. What can you do? And then all of a sudden, if this is the case, if AWS as a service platform can have a smooth launch with a game, then literally the point is like, well, Amazon figured it out. Like, we don't have that example, right? We don't have that example yet.
There's also that thing that anybody will instantly say, well, Amazon has like infinite money. It's like they can just keep throwing money at a problem.
But here's the counter to that. Well, why haven't you partnered with them?
Why haven't
Like that's
partner with? Oh, yeah,
developers, right? Because this in and of itself, people are like, oh, New World, etc. It's like New World is not just about Amazon Game Studios, but it's also a advertisement for Amazon or AWS, Amazon, Worldwide Services. It literally is, just like with Microsoft and Halo launching with Azure, just like with Google and Stadia. These are things that are also to help advertise other things that are coming down the road.
Now, we already touched upon the business model, which is essentially you buy it once and you can play it forever, depending on whether or not they later decide to bring expansions.
I bet expansion model is the future. Yeah. And they also said that they're considering battle passes, which has me go, ugh. However, if they go and do the Halo model where my battle pass doesn't expire, then I'm like, okay, I'm game for that.
We'll see what that happens. But an interesting thing about the business model as well is that most AAA games that come out, they're $60, or nowadays on a PlayStation they're $70, as we've talked at length about in another Epic Loot Radio show. But it's like this one's $40, right? That's the price, $40.
It starts at $40. There's a $50 special
deluxe edition and whatnot. And while we're on the topic of that, it's like, we have pre-order bonuses as well, and obviously deluxe editions and all of this stuff. One of the things that I hate whenever companies do like pre-orders and deluxe editions is like early access. And particularly with MMOs, we see that. And it's one of the things that I don't like about Final Fantasy XIV is the 3D early access. I just don't like it. I'm not a big fan of it. Yeah. Like, doesn't mean that I don't like the game. I love the game, going to play it, all that stuff, right? But I still don't like that specific practice of you pay me more or you pre-order whatever, and here's early access. And interestingly enough, I expected that from this game. And I was surprised that is not the case.
3 days early before everybody else.
Something like that.
If they did that, I would be livid, because there is a PvP aspect. You do not have to PvP in this game. Now, I'm a PvPer, but I want to like recognize that not everybody needs to be me and not everybody needs to PvP. But that's kind of where cash shops become a real contentious point. And I'm going to address Fia's question here in just a second. However, there's a land rush. You can, as a company, you can take over zones. And I think if they gave anybody that kind of pre-order early access bonus, it breaks that flow. Like, there is going to be that land rush that happens on your server. And I think everybody should be on the same footing, because that in my mind is fair. It doesn't require that pre-order. You could literally see somebody streaming at 9 o'clock in the morning and go ahead and just like, all right, I'm in. That's exciting. I'm going to play this game, and boom. Then by the time you get home or it's downloaded, you're in. You're not sitting here having to like, oh, they actually had 3 days ahead of me. They already have control. Like, they've already locked it down. And so now I have to try to play this massive amount of catch up. Yes, you're going to be competing with streamers. In fact, there's actually a website that's tracking all the different streamers and content creators on what server they're going to be on. So if you don't want to have to like compete in that, then you can avoid it. If you want to be a part of that like chaos and that excitement, then you can go and specifically target a server for that. But anyway, yeah, I think it's really good that they did not do that. And I think anything that gives a player an advantage over another player immediately becomes like a mindset of pay to win, because that PvP aspect. Again, completely optional, but it's a core aspect of the sandbox of the game itself.
I'm just happy that they didn't do the early access stuff like I expected. So it's just a weird thing, because nowadays you're always just like expected from most video games. Like, okay, so you're giving me all these good things. How are you going to screw me over? Particularly in MMOs, you're almost always expecting, how are you going to screw me over? It is just something that is to be expected. So you're looking at it and you're going like, okay, so $40 pay to play and no monthly subscription fee, no like gameplay affecting bonuses. From what I saw anyways on the deluxe edition and on pre-orders and all this stuff, there's no game changing stuff. There is like a couple of skins. I think there's like a house pet that you can get if you get a house or something, but not even mounts, nothing. As a matter of fact, mounts I think is a topic that you want to get into, right?
Let's talk about mounts. Yeah. Absolutely. There are no mounts in this game, and they said that if they do add mounts into this game in the future, they want to make sure they put a lot of thought and design into it. And I put out a guide on this specific thing, because one of the core aspects is that if you're running from zone to zone to zone as a new player, you're doing it wrong,
You're
because
supposed to teleport.
there's teleportation, which is great. Allow you to get from, like, once you've been to a city, you can teleport there, but there's an Azoth cost. It's like a teleport currency and a crafting currency, and you're capped. But there's lots of ways of getting Azoth. And that's the thing. Like, if you spend the majority of your starting game running from place to place, you're going to find you're wasting a lot of time. The most critical thing is to get your zone rank up, because you level up as a character, but you also level up in the zone, and you can then purchase a house. The house will give you a free teleport every couple of hours, depending on the size of the house. You also get a free end room teleport once an hour. Like, from a quality of life and a gameplay perspective that will pay off for years and years, is to unlock housing, and then you can unlock various teleportation zones. And then if you are doing any kind of gathering, you can get a tool that has a perk that will gather Azoth for you as well. So you can be getting Azoth constantly fed to you throughout the game. And so, like, within the first 20-25 levels, you should actually be in a really good stage to start, like, just easily getting around the world very quickly, as long as you follow the core tenets of getting a house, because you can actually ultimately have up to 3 houses. So that gives you 4 teleportation locations outside of that doesn't cost you anything, and then you could then start teleporting with the Zoth to towns and even to fast travel locations.
Just for clarification, I believe that the housing system is instanced. So, like, you can see the houses in the towns.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming, like, if you buy it, it'll just, like, now this is my house.
Oh.
So whenever I'm close to it, this is my house. But if, like, for another player, he can buy the same house and be like, this is also my house. Right?
This is the system that I want to see implemented into Final Fantasy XIV. Like, from its design, the housing system, I think, is really cool. It exists in the open world, but your version of the house is instant. So if you buy a house, you decorate that house, you will always see your house. It looks like yours. However, other people will see their house. So you could actually sell that same house, that instance of that house existing in the open world, to countless other players. So there's no housing crisis, right? Like, oh, somebody already owns that house and I'm never going to get it now. Then when it comes to who, like, let's say you don't own the house and I don't own the house. Whose house do we see? You and I are competing on a weekly little, like, feng shui design, and we get scored, and whoever has the highest score of their design is the house that's on display. The prettiest house is what's
my house
displayed.
Is never going to be on display ever. my house either. Is never going to be on display, dude. Yeah. Listen, there used to be housing in Ultima Online. You know, it used to be in front of my house. The heads of other players. That's what I put in there. So, like, here's some heads, like, on the rooftop of my house. I was like, here's a couple of heads too.
He was a barbarian and a monster, people. He was a monster. Yeah. But he governed fairly, but he was a fair governor. Yeah.
Yeah. So another question that I think is very important, particularly for new players, is what is the server structure going to be? I actually don't know what this is like yet. I know that for the betas, you would go into one server, and it's like a character lives on that server forever. Yes. That's it. Is that what it's going to be in the final game as well?
To start, yeah, absolutely. And I have a theory that we'll see features and quality of life open up down the road, but with the launch and the land rush and balance, I think they're going to wait to see how the population shakes out. My personal theory is, just with any kind of game hype, it's going to rise really quickly, and then as soon as Call of Duty comes out, you'll probably see it, fall off and kind of get
there's
into...
a phone book of servers right now. There's
many Amazon said they already got several, like, just like on standby for when, people start filling up various servers. So it is going to be limited. Like, they'll have 1,000, they say, like, more than 1,000 at launch playing it at the same time. So you can have more than 1,000 characters, but the servers are set up to support 1,000. They have a goal at the start here, and they want to grow to where they have 10,000 people playing at the same time on any given server. But we don't have a roadmap for that. And that's going to be an interesting technological feat.
I just wish that there was a way for you to, like, at least visit servers, like kind of what we have because it's going to be a real bummer, particularly at the start of the game, for you and your friends to try and all get on the same server. It's like, oh, server's full. Johnny didn't make it in. Well, Johnny's going to have to play by himself.
Yeah, that's one of the things that the feedback I actually provided from the beta. I was like, listen, I want to progress on my character, but my server is full. And if it's full to the point where, like, I got to wait 30 minutes, okay, that's not a problem. I'm going to go make a snack. I'm going to go, et cetera. I'm going to come back, and then we're going to be ready to play. But if it's like, here's the 6-hour queue, well, oh, this server is completely empty. I would just like guest. Let me take my character. Let me go guest over here so I can at least play and, and then come back. But I think, well, that's something they're going to have to solve in the long run of the health of the game, especially as servers are, we'll see the server balancing, at its full force, especially with streamers like Asmongold and other big content creators, playing the game. It's like, there's going to be really popular servers and there's going to be servers that are probably going to be like, hey, yeah, this is a pretty kind of low key environment or something like that. Now, I do want to address Via's question because like I've kept it up on screen long for a while. Saying, do you think though that with the way the whole game is built, you'll be chasing your tail and everyone else if you stop playing for a few months? And the answer is no. The reason is that when I look at how I play and consume games, it's like my own personal goals. Like, yes, maybe if you stop playing at level 35 and then you come back, there's a lot of level 60 players running around and they might be going and doing level 60 content, but you can still progress. Like it does not require that you have a party of people to continue to play the game itself. Honestly, the biggest challenge I think for me personally is going to be stop fishing and actually progress through the story and get to level cap and 60 and have my exhaust staff, because there's a lot of things going on and there's a lot of things I really can't wait for you to experience in the game. But I think essentially the game is going to be very well structured. Yes, somebody who's playing is going to have more resources and more money than you do. But if you don't even it doesn't even matter. PvP scaling, there's a scaling feature to PvP. We talked about that our last episode. Yeah, it is what it is. Like maybe like your company hasn't controlled any zones, but it's really going to be about what you want to experience. And that's where I think the beauty of the player driven economy comes from. Because if you're not like really into like, oh, I don't care about the PvP aspect, but you want to profit from it, like, oh, people need, materials. Let me just be the supplier of said materials. And that's the way that you could completely enjoy this game. I think it's nice because it's a blend of the sandbox and the theme park. You do have a kind of a quest line. There is a quest and a story to follow. You can choose to follow that story. You can choose to go off into the woods and do your own thing. You can choose to come back to the story. Like, I think that's going to give you a lot of player flexibility, personally speaking.
I'm actually curious about the PvP scaling thing because I haven't really heard too much about it. What's the deal with that? You get scaled down, scaled up, or
so? And this they made some changes in the open beta, and they're still trying to figure out the right balance, because when it comes to an MMO and an RPG specifically, like player investment is important and should be respected to a degree, but when it comes to the fact that like if you got a level 15 player out there, there is a skill benefit. Like there should be a level of skill. Like a skilled player should be able to 9 out of 10 times be the victor, or 8 out of 10 times, whatever that is. So the scaling right now works in a way that it's like, yes, the skilled player has can still win, but the last change they made it to where the higher level player has a greater percentage. I think that needs to be tweaked. I honestly don't have an issue with like every 10 levels is like 10%. Like, oh, if you're 10 levels higher, you got 10% better chance, up to maybe a theoretical cap of 25 or 30% stat benefit. But a low level player is not going to be completely demolished by a level 60 player. If they play well. If you don't play well, then you're dead. If you get zerged, you're going to get dead.
So currently with the changes that they've made, what would you say that percentage is for the higher level player?
I would say right now it's overkill. It's probably about 40% favoring the higher level player. That's what a lot of the kickback was. That's what a lot of the drama in the New World community was, because in the closed beta, it was more favoring skill. And then a lot of people were like, oh, all these streamers were whining about the fact that they got beat by these lower level players, and that's why they made this change. And I think that it was just them adjusting. We'll see the release notes here maybe today or tomorrow or something like that. And when we get the release notes, we'll have a more concrete understanding of what that scaling is going to ultimately look like. I think that's going to be a balance. They're going to try to find that perfect balance, because if I put in more time, and this is an RPG, there should be a benefit. You get the perks, you get maybe an advantage stat wise. But if I can't hit you because you're just dodging all over the place and you knock me out, like, you were the better player, right? Like I personally want that, because I think PvP is about skill before it's about
I
stats.
genuinely believe that when it comes to PvP, the maximum difference should actually be around 10%. That'd
Yeah.
be my personal cap,
Yeah.
because like, hey, look, doesn't matter if I play 1,000 hours. If you can play better than me, then you should be able to beat me. Period. It shouldn't be like, oh no, but I have the
I have
hammer
the
of
sword.
smash your face.
Right.
I have the smash your face hammer, and I'm just gonna smash your face, and you're dead.
I
Like
think
that. I don't think
when it
that's
comes
fun.
to the stats, like that 10% feels really good. I could go up to 20 in terms of a stat bonus, but the thing that they have, the more experienced player is going to have perks on their gear where the newer player won't. And we see that happen in things like Destiny. And I don't see a lot of like, yeah, I'm sure people are going to complain when you get beat. You're like, oh, you didn't really beat me. You only beat me because you had that, whatever. Hopefully that ends up becoming more of a motivational thing for the PvPer, as opposed to something like, I really can't PvP until I hit 60, because as soon as I turn flagging on, it's like I'm butter and they're hot knives. Like, that's what you don't want. You want an experience where it's like, oh, you want to dance? Let's dance. Welcome to the Dog and Pony Show.
That is more interesting. At the start of on the very first preview, and I think even on the actually I don't know if on the second one they had it or not, but on the very first preview there were no instance dungeons. Everything was like just open world.
Right.
But since then they've added instance dungeons. I was actually trying to level up enough on the second time around, but I wasn't able to do it because I ended up going on vacation and whatnot. But did you do any of these dungeons yet? The instance?
No, I've once I was like, I'm in on this game. I'm excited. I've held off on a lot. I don't want to burn out. Like, and so it was like, yep, I'm ready. This game is what I've been wanting, and I'm ready to play it. I'm ready to share it with everybody. Yes, I could go do that from a content creator's perspective, but I know I was like, especially because the release date was originally last month, and then they pushed it to the 28th just to kind of make sure that they were ready. I was like, okay, I'm going to do the dungeons. I'm excited to experience that. And it's going to be something really fun for me to do, with my community. And the fact that they have them, I think is a good piece of content. I think essentially the more types of content that they can add is good. I do not want them to go full hog and make everything instance content. We have enough instant simulator MMOs in our world today that having more open world content, I think is what makes New World stand out the most. But it's perfectly fine to have these pieces of content, especially because they have it behind the keys behind the economy. So a part of going to the dungeon is you get a quest and you get a orb that will open up the door for a dungeon. Those orbs are required to go into the dungeon, and then they can be crafted and sold on the market. So if you don't want to like bother making them, you can go purchase them and then go engage in that content. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to put myself in a queue and I'm just like, I just log in, I run a couple dungeons and I go home. Like there is an economy that I think it really kind of balances out that mindset. Thus, it's like I could go farm in the open world. I could go run a dungeon. I could go do PvP. And as the game grows, I think we'll see that list of things that you could do open up over time.
Yeah. Speaking of PvP, for those of you that aren't aware, we haven't brought this up yet, but the PvP in this game is around 3 factions. It's a 3-faction system. You pick a faction, and then basically you go to war with the other factions. There's like some more in-depth stuff with like you capturing the land and whatnot, which is, I believe, 50 versus 50 versus 50, right?
So good. That's a perfect for first thing I got to say for new players considering the game. You pick your faction, you're locked into it for 120 days. If you're coming into this game with friends, figure out your faction now. Figure it out now.
Yeah.
War is 50v50. There's no like 3-pronged attack.
Oh, okay.
So what it happens to be though is that you have that's the only way to change hands. That's actually the balance in terms of land ownership and how that works out. Where yes, let's say you have like 1,000 people that are a part of your faction. Great. And you have another faction that maybe has 500. Oh man, the 500 people they'll never be able to own land. Not necessarily, because when it comes to declaring war, it's going to be 50v50, and you might have a chance of getting in. If you're a big company, it might actually be somebody else. Like you don't know who the game's going to select. By playing the game and doing activities, it's going to increase your odds that you go in, but that doesn't mean necessarily that's going to happen. So handing over the land doesn't come down to who has the biggest team, who has the biggest faction. It comes down to 50 players versus 50 players, and that's how it's going to be decided. There is another element, a PvE mode, very similar, where it's the game does invasions, and it's the same setup, except for instead of playing against another player, you're actually horde moding, defending your area versus waves and waves of monsters, and hopefully successfully. Otherwise, you end up like the town gets destroyed, and all your progress in the town gets rolled back, and then you got to start it all up again, etc.
Yeah. That is going to be a bit of a pain.
Yeah, especially you're like, I needed a tier 3 crafting station for this recipe.
And now you don't have it.
That's where you want to be defending.
So how's that stuff going to work with the tier 3s and whatnot for the crafting system as well? Because I haven't gotten too deep into the crafting.
So you can actually craft pretty much anywhere, but certain recipes, especially the more advanced, will require upgraded stations. Towns and city, like towns in the game, the hamlets, they get upgraded by people doing quests and doing kind of their town tasks. And as that gets upgraded and as the town is controlled, they actually get a player that is going to be the mayor of that city. And so they can decide like, hey, I want to upgrade crafting, or I want to upgrade defenses, or I want to do this. And the more people who are participating in that, the better that system goes. He can also go and just be a complete like jerk and say, I'm going to increase taxing like an insane amount, and then ultimately you're gonna like, well, let's overthrow this jerk.
That's
because
or you're just like, you don't go to that town. It's not like that's the only town. You go somewhere else.
Oh yeah, it's like, all right guys, like this guy's like and I saw somebody put like taxing up to like 20 or 30% like on everything, and it's like, well, I'm not going to trade here. I'm just going to go down the road. Exactly. And it's awesome. Like it's great that I kind of had that choice, and so it does have an incentive. There are benefits to zone control. And I think
there's also benefits to being a good ruler, because if you're not greedy and you put like 2 or 3% taxes, you might get it. And if you're greedy and you go like, nah, 30% taxes, you're like, well, that's too bad. I guess we're not going to do our trading in here then.
Exactly. And especially
we'll just take our business elsewhere.
Unless everybody like you get some freaking back street like shenanigans going on where everybody's like, let's all get together and we're all going to decide every maximum taxing on every city. Then as a player, you're like, well, let's form another group and we're gonna overthrow this stuff.
We need to form a faction within a faction to actually beat the crap out of all of these guys.
It's going to be interesting to see how it kind of shakes out over the course of the runtime of the game, because that's, I think, when people say, oh, we need more dungeons, oh, we need more this, oh, we need more that. Like, I get it, but I think a big draw of the game for a lot of players is like, oh yeah, I finished the kind of the stories. I've kind of seen the world. Now I want to take over that zone. Now I want to be a part of kind of the sandbox game that is always changing. And you can participate in zone control by undermining zones by doing PvE missions. So you can go out and do your faction missions, and you can participate without having to go full on PvP. If you're not a PvPer, you can supply crafts, and there's just, I think, a lot of things that are going to open up to the player base. I just can't wait to see how it shakes out. Like that's the kind of like, even as a non-fan, that's just like, how is this going to work?
There's an interesting
MMO launch in 2021 and hold a community.
There's an interesting like social experiment to the whole thing, as to see how the players actually govern themselves, because there's so many things that are player controlled. Like we talked about, the economy is going to be player controlled. The towns are going to be player controlled. There's a lot of things that are going to be interesting to see how they shake up and how the dominance is going to be in each server. Because like each server is like, it's going to be like a metaverse of itself, right, basically.
And so you'll see server cultures kind of form.
Yeah.
And some things like, hey, this is not acceptable on this server. This is acceptable on the server. And just as kind of a final thought, when we talk about factions and your friends, you can still duel, you can still fight, and you can actually duel up 1v1s up to 5v5s. So if you're like, oh, I really want to fight with my friends, that doesn't mean that you all have to be in a different faction. You can all be in the same faction, and you can still fight each other and practice and have fun with those additional systems. It's just important to note that if you pick a faction, you're locked in that faction for a while, and your company that you make can only consist of your faction members. So if you make a company that is a part of the Syndicate or the Marauders or the Covenant, like that is who they are. So only Covenant, only Marauders, only Syndicate would be allowed and functioning members within that structure.
Yep. That that is going to be interesting again, just to see the balance of that whole thing, how it's going to shake up between each of the servers. My biggest concern is still like they haven't really talked anything about the theme park main quest, right? That's still the plan for the launch.
It exists. It exists. They've added voice acting to it, and I think that's going to help with characterization. I just think, so if I was talking to my Final Fantasy 14 brethren out there, like Final Fantasy 14 Endwalker is going to have a better story. Even if the story for some reason out of the blue sucks, you're going to have a better storied experience with Endwalker. However, there's a lot of exposition and a lot of delivery in how, New World does it, and New World allows you more flexibility. So it's not so rigid in terms of, oh, you want to go to that, you want to go run up to the highest level zone? Go for it. New World's got that freedom of exploration and danger that you set versus 14, where it's like, yep, this is the order in which that things happen. And to get to the new zone, you have to unlock the new zone by playing through the story. So there's no wrong choice in design. Your preference is going to be your preference.
Yeah, pretty much. That's going to be the way that it's going to work out. And again, I'm probably going to not engage too hardcore on that quest at the start, because I feel like I just want to go to a zone, hunt some stuff, do a couple of quests, and then later down the line, when there's less people doing it, because like that is so immersion breaking, that starting experience, just like, oh, it just happened to like 1,000 players just landed on this beach.
Yes.
And we're all just like talking to the exact same person who's sending us to do the exact same things 1,000 times.
1,000 times. In fact, Devlin actually kind of points that out. Distractions are going to be their downfall in questing. There's always something to collect just around the corner. And that's
particularly in that game.
That's for me. Like I said, like, hey Brian, how's the game coming along? Are you enjoying it? And it's like, zzz. Turns out, like, because that's what I actually been doing a lot in Final Fantasy XI is just fishing and crafting and gathering. Like, it's just, for me, the moment, like, whenever you say, like, when does a game, like, have its hooks in you? From the first tree I chopped down, that's when I was like, there's something magical going on with this game. Doesn't need to be perfect at launch. No game is. No MMO is specifically. It's going to be funny to see all the freaking headlines. I'm just sitting back and just waiting for the pattern, what I call the pattern, to play out. Oh, New World, servers are good, people are happy, or servers are crashing. You'll see, like, no matter what, you're going to see the clickbait articles and then the shocked face and the oh my gosh moments. And like, we've all come to expect that. We know the dance. We know how this story plays out.
Yep.
But essentially what I'm excited about is like, are you having fun? Great. Who gives a shit what anybody else says? Who cares? Oh, if you're not having fun, guess what? I have a lot of awesome games that I can recommend to you as well.
I'm just gonna blunderbuss my way through the whole thing. That's it. I had no idea that the blunderbuss was even in there. I was like, dude, because I don't care about muskets, but you give me a good shotgun, it's like I'm all about that.
Yeah, and we don't know exactly when the blunderbuss will be delivered, but that's the thing, right? It's not launching with blunderbuss.
No, okay. I'm out. I quit.
He's out.
I quit.
He's
That's it.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the beauty of it is that when that does come out, like that's going to be an update that you might want to check out, right? So it's like, oh, hey, yeah, I got my axe and I played and I did the story. Oh, wait, the blunderbuss is out. I want to see how that plays. Oh, wow, that really changes up my build. And now I'm going to go do all this other stuff with it. Like the fact that we do know that our updates are coming. The question is that can Amazon establish a cadence to those updates? I think if it becomes like, even if it's to a fault predictable, every 3 months, big update for New World. Oh, heaven forfend. Like, that's awesome. Like, I can start to schedule and be excited around it. We don't know. And the only way we'll know is when Amazon does it. Same thing with 14. We didn't know the pattern for 14 until they delivered on that. They didn't promise any pattern. I think that's the important thing. I see people calling for roadmaps and all this stuff. And I go, I want to see action, and then they can tell me their plan. Don't tell me your plan. I don't believe you. It just won't.
Yeah. It's like we discussed on Crystal Core. It's essentially, it's all about consistency. If they're able to consistently deliver content that keeps people coming back, that is going to be what this game is going to live or die by, essentially.
100%.
We briefly touched up on mounts, and I think that is one of the topics that people were raging on a little bit about, because I looked up a couple of news articles before the podcast, and I was like, oh wow, there's like 5 or 6 different articles. There's tons of drama and stuff going on. And it's like, to me, the thing about mounts is that I don't think mounts are as important as how fun is it to traverse the world.
It's beautiful.
I know that the world itself is beautiful. I'm just saying, how fun is the act of actually traversing the world? Because like, if I was to give you an example of really good MMO traversal that I've experienced recently, it was definitely New Genesis. Phantasy Star Online, New Genesis, like they do traversal outstanding. Because like it actually reminds me of another game that I played, which was Xenoblade Chronicles X. Because basically they just jump really high, glide, do all of these crazy things so you can access all of these different areas. And I think that in and of itself is cool. Now they can't do that in New World, but they could potentially do something that makes traversal maybe a little bit more active. I'm not exactly sure what that could be. I mean, obviously we've already seen players go on the route of like, oh, I'll just equip this weapon, like the axe that has a charge, and then I have another charge with this other weapon, and you just go like, and then jump, and then another thing. And it's just, that is something that we see the players do. But I think it'd be more interesting if there was actually something in the world that would allow you to just like, oh, I can do this action while I'm running, and this will make me go faster. And if I land it just perfectly, like just coming up with, there was that game, I think it was called Tribes. I don't know if you've ever played it.
Yeah.
So you had those hills, right? Where you'd be able to like jump up really high and then start skiing on the hills and then come up on the other side. Like things like that make traversal more interactive, to me, I think are more interesting than just mounts. But then again, just running everywhere, that is going to be something that I think is going to be a bit of a flaw, because that's not going to be nearly as interesting as just like, having something there.
The nice thing is that running from place to place builds in this kind of downtime that drives community chat, and the fact that you can chat with your company, your faction, and your friends, and just the general population if you want to. There's some really interesting people in the world, and they've got interesting theories, and they're going to share them. And so if anybody's thinking, an online game is a safe space, I'm going to tell you right now, like you need to cancel that thought, because there's like someone's like, oh, my safe space is like, no, you know what? I'm an empathetic person. Like I try to practice empathy when I can. And I go, all right, like ideally, you could go and you could be happy, etc. But let's live in reality. It's just not going to happen. Now, Paul says
it's not going to happen, especially with PvP.
Exactly. Yeah. There's going to be toxicity. There's going to be drama, and those are going to be stories that the players make. And that's one of the key aspects. The developers with this aspect that they've built can take more time to create hopefully a really beautiful crafted story and world and lore, so that we can discover that. But then the stories that I think people will remember more than New World's story is the stories that we, the players, make ourselves. And we see that with Eve. We see that with sandbox-based games, Final Fantasy XI being one of them. It's harder to get into, so it's a little bit more intimidating. But ultimately, it opens itself up. And just like Paul says, they totally underestimated how good the New World would be. Glad that they played the open beta, and New World is their sort of game. I think one of the key aspects of the benefits for New World in its back pocket is it's the doubt. It's the questioning of the game. The maybe the realistic expectations, or expectations being set pretty low. Like, it's Amazon. They haven't had a good game. So, based off of that track record, I can conclude that all future games from them are going to be bad games. Like, if you have that mindset, then all of a sudden you see people having fun and you play it and you're like, oh, this totally subverts my expectations. Where when you look at Ashes of Creation and I hear that game's going to save the MMO genre as a whole, I go, even if Ashes is an incredible game, if people think it's the second coming of Christ, then at the end of the day, like, it can't, if it's not that, then it's like, okay. That'd be a weird way for Christ to come back into the world, through the Ashes of Creation. I've returned. I think
that it's going to be very hard for Ashes of Creation to live up to literally anything that people expect to it. I think it's going to be damn near impossible, because there's way too much hype around that. There's also a lot of hype around, New World for sure, but I think there's also a lot of people, because of the fact that they've already gotten to play it, whereas the Ashes of Creation's only been, you know, sure, you can see a streamer play it, but you never know what it's like until you actually get your hands on an MMO. And the fact that they again, that was another thing that I thought was impressive, is like, because, you know, they've given access to creators to go to the closed betas and all of that stuff. And but the fact that right before release, they're like, no, everybody gets to try it out, figure it out for yourself, see if you like it, see if you don't like it. That's like the best thing that you can do to sell someone on your video game, as far as I'm concerned.
I think
like,
that was a really
let
good
them
move.
try it.
It was a really good move. I hate when games are like, try it under, you know, the closed beta, and that's the original plan. But I think they took that closed beta, they learned a lot from it, and then they're like, we need more time. And then in lieu of that, they opened it up. And so just like with Paul being able to go and play the game for himself, I think that was a strong move. The other strong move is that I think the barrier for entry being at $40 and no subscription fee is very inviting. It's very inviting. So you don't, because like, oh, what do you mean I got to commit to a subscription every month? Like, oh man, like that's, maybe you can do that, maybe you can't. We've all been in different positions financially in our lives. There was a time where I was like, after 2008's big crash, like I was unemployed for a while because they laid off like my whole department. And my friend was like, hey, I got your Final Fantasy XI sub. I was like, dude, you're the best. You know, it's like, so while I was unemployed, I was able to kick back, play some video games still. But that subscription fee, especially when like,
it was a barrier to entry.
It is a barrier. It still is, but it's something that for me, that it's like, that's just a part of my budget
at the moment. Yeah.
It saves me from buying every game out on the market. Right. Cause it's like, and that's one of the common critiques that people have of me as a content creator, is like, well, you don't play all these single player games. It's like, yeah, I know. Cause kind of pot committed over here. like, oh, I'm going to make sure I play my sub game. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm going to be over there. But it's, I'm hoping with New World's financial model, yes, there's a cash shop. Okay. We're going to have to watch that. That's a matter of trust. Amazon has to build trust with the players. That's the power to communication, listening. And then if the answer is no, or if the answer is this, to come out and talk about how they thought through it. Yoshi P is the best example of a leader when it comes to it. Don't give content creators like myself the ability to interpolate your actions.
Yeah.
Speak, and then essentially
speak plainly.
Yes. And carry a big stick. But no, but it's so true, because essentially what you see with the fall of Blizzard, you know, and I say fall, they could always come out, they could always add, you know, Phoenix down and see what happens. But
I think fall is a very good word, especially because, you know, I have a video titled "The Fall of Blizzard."
Guys, go to sub to Ruri if you guys have not already. Freaking amazing. I love his content. And also we were joking because he comes in and he's like, hey, here's what I'm thinking about for the show. I was like, dude, you make an amazing podcast host. Man, I'm seeing here, and there's a call back to Crystal Core. It's like I'm seeing in my phone prophecy that it's a fleet. It's not a first fleet. It's not a second fleet, but maybe it's a third fleet podcast. Guys, go sub to his third fleet podcast if you guys haven't yet. But it's, I think, essentially where if you look at Destiny and you look at like, how do you monetize the gap between the expansion? And if they come out every year with an expansion, I think that's great. And I think if there's a cost to that expansion, that's great. Like, there's nothing wrong with a company making money, especially if we're getting more content than we want with it. And what I think here is, from an ideal perspective, I don't know if that's an expansion a year or if they go the Final Fantasy model and go every 2 years, but regardless, being able to have that and deliver that to the player base, I think would be really exciting, especially for somebody who's on the fence, who's like, I'm not going to go in today. I'm not playing at launch. But all of a sudden, when they come out and say, here's our first expansion, here's our second expansion, all of a sudden the stories of will they continue to support it go away. And you're like, oh, clearly there's all of this stuff for me to do. And we see that with MMOs. The fact of updates and the fact of expansions constantly puts it in front of people. And it then invites people to be a part of that as a community. Like there's a real draw to that. That's why I focus more on these games than any other.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. They just have to prove themselves, that they have to prove to players, actually, not to themselves. They have to prove to players that they can do it. They can get that cadence going. And I think that they might actually have something good here, because it is, like someone said in chat earlier, it is also a very unique style in terms of like what the aesthetics of the game are, because like, oh, it's friggin' conquistador times and whatnot. It's not just your traditional fantasy or sci-fi. It's this weird period of time. It's just got its own unique thing, which is not my favorite style, mind you. Like that
Yeah.
whole conquistador thing, it's not really my favorite thing. I'm more into sci-fi or traditional fantasy, but still, that's what they're going for, and I think it's interesting. And we have a wide variety of weapons to go with that, so that's good.
Your point, and that's actually going to be like that was the thing that I thought was going to be my biggest hang up was that style.
Yeah,
but playing in the world, it just fits.
Yeah,
but at first, like I was like, this isn't really my view. This isn't really kind of my style. I don't have an elf. I don't have etc. I don't have that traditional fantasy because that's my style. Fantasy. I'll definitely do sci-fi like Phantasy Star Online. So that's what I love. But what actually ended up being is that the world is so beautiful, and it just all the art and all the style actually fits so well together. It makes sense once you play it and you're feeling around in it. But at first I was like, this doesn't look like my kind of game. Turns out I was wrong, and that's why I'm really glad that I followed it out of curiosity, and then I continued to follow it because I was like, there's something here. Like there is something here in this game that I think is worth my time.
Yeah. I'm just like, I just always love that launch window of MMOs. And, I've played this one, and there were enough things there when I was playing that I was like, okay, I like this thing. I like the way that the combat kind of plays out. They're doing action combat. You got active blocking, which I personally also tend to like with shields and whatnot, because I'm a big shield guy, as you probably know. So it's like, I like the fact that the combat is active. I like a lot of things about it. My main concern is always going to be like the faction imbalance potential and all of these other things, because you don't want to just run around there and just be like, oh, my faction kind of sucks in this server, so I'm kind of screwed. So that's kind of like my main thing. I hope that stuff remains balanced to some extent. And if it does that, and it just lets me dip into PvP a little bit, dip into PvE a little bit, just hang out. Like I said, it's not going to be my main MMO game, because that's always going to be Final Fantasy XIV moving forward. I'm just expecting something for me to just like dip my toes into and enjoy myself a little bit. And at the price point, it is kind of a value proposition. Like if you can get, let's say you play the game, right? I don't know how long it takes for people to reach the max level and do the quest. I don't know if there's times of that. Are there? Has anybody timed it yet? Because people have got like the level
somebody
count.
was able to do it within the closed beta. I'm sure somebody was able to do it during the open beta. They were doing hacks and exploits during closed, so things to find and patch. I don't know. I guess what we'll see. And that's the thing is, like, I don't think this is a game that you want to rush. Exactly. I think there's the curse of WoW ends up being that there's a lot of people who've been trained that the core game takes place at the end game. I came from Final Fantasy XI, in which that I believe the end game starts at level 1, because you're living in a world that interacts with each other, and even a level 1 player is having an impact on the economy, and that economy can drive what people feel like is the most important piece of content through taxing and through the systems. Like it becomes a world that you are participating in as a player, but also a world that you're kind of living in, that you can experience.
That is definitely one of the things that I've actually talked about this in videos and whatnot, that I feel as someone who's played World of Warcraft extensively. Like I have over, I don't even know how many hours it is at this point, but it's a ridiculous number, right?
More than me.
Yeah, for sure. But like, I've logged in ridiculous amounts of hours into World of Warcraft, and I would definitely say that World of Warcraft trains players to an excessive degree, like an unhealthy degree, that no, listen, this stuff that you're doing before you get to it doesn't matter. None of this matters anymore. Okay. This old, like even if it's almost like, how, imagine Shadowlands, right? Shadowlands comes out. You see this stuff you're doing right now between level 50 and 60. This doesn't matter.
Right.
And which is why you would look at streamers, they'd be just like, skip. Like Asmongold reached level cap in 5 hours. It's like, what? Come on. And Asmongold's not even like a speedrunners reach level cap within like, I don't know, 2 hours, 1 hour. It was super fast. People like reaching level cap. They're skipping everything. They're only doing quests. They're like the most, the ones that reward the most experience, and they're bypassing everything else that they can. And again, this is the World of Warcraft mentality. And unfortunately, I feel that is going to be something that is going to be plaguing MMOs for a long time to come. Like most players think like that. That's the reason why I didn't get into Final Fantasy XIII when I first tried it, is because I was playing it like WoW. And I think that a
Yeah.
lot of people probably make that mistake and they burn out on 14.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, Lazy Peon is a great example of exactly what you just said. He played 14 like WoW, and then he came out and said, it's not a fun game. I don't know why people like this game. And then the downside about the 14 community is that we do have a very vocal and
it's like I say, listen, people always say that Final Fantasy has a fantastic community, which is true. But what I like to say is like they're fantastic inside the game. Outside the game, sometimes things get a little wild.
Yeah, and I always kind of question, like, are you a gamer? And I hope to God you're not an adult. If you're an adult and this is your reaction to that, like even like I was like I the only thing that bothered me about Lazy Peon's first review of 14 was that he took the review down. That he got so much hate that he took the video down. Stand by it. If you're going to sit here and and this is just my view, like people can do their own thing, but I don't take videos down. I stand by it because it's like, that's what I said. And I'm not especially let's say I got it wrong. Guess what? I think then I can create a follow-up video. I can address that. But I think taking it down is the worst thing to do because it's like, then I shouldn't have said it. Right?
Exactly.
Like, I shouldn't have said it if I was going to take it down. And that's just where I fall into it. I was like, yep, okay. So he did that, and I lost a lot of respect for him. But then he's been working on playing the game, and he's actually playing, and he's like, oh, I see the draw. Like the reward for doing the quest is the cutscene. It's the development of the characters. Go ahead.
The biggest selling point of this, the people that sell this game the best is the community. And I feel like 14 is the perfect example of word of mouth. Because like the thing that got me to
great memes on that, but go ahead.
The thing that got me really to play it differently is like my community was telling me, no, listen, try doing it like this. And it's not like they were telling me, oh no, do this quest. They weren't being overly, they're just like, listen, focus on this and then do these blue quests with the plus sign. And that was when I realized, this thing that World of Warcraft has trained me to do is actually terrible. This is because you miss out on so much trying to just burn through the whole game. So I'm just hoping that, with a lot of people playing 14 right now and taking that different approach, because we see a lot of people taking a different approach now and just slowly going through the game as opposed to just burning through it to get the Shadowbringers, because that's where all the fun is, right?
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that more people have learned from that and they bring that mentality into New World, where we'll see an active community from, leveling all the way up to max level. There's always going to be the people that rush to max level because they got to be the first. They got that competitive mentality. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. If you're someone that wants to have that competitive mentality and, no, I got to be the best, whatever, we all need that in every game. Like the people that just want to be the best from a competitive standpoint. I'm just hoping that, we have those people, and then the rest of the people that think, oh, I need to follow this because the competitive people are doing it too. I hope they take a step back and no, maybe I should play this the way that it's more fun for me, as opposed to trying to get the max level, fast, go.
Yeah, that's I think it's definitely good advice to kind of, at the end of the day, if you're having fun, don't let me ruin it. Play as long as you're having fun. However, that my perspective is that the WoW, that whole mindset is not a good one. It's not a good way to play these games, and it's ingrained that into a culture. So when that culture comes into other games, they feel like that's a pure translation, and I don't think it necessarily needs to be, nor should it. But then again, I've been trained differently, so it's like my MMO history and experience is different. Like I'm there for the story. I'm enjoying that aspect. The reward is the cutscene. The reward is to see what happens next. The reward is opening up the next thing. It's a hard balance because I also enjoy New World sandbox mindset. All right, I'm just going this direction. I'm just gonna go do my thing.
I was much more into a sandbox aspect. Like one of the games, it's not really an MMO, but it can be an MMO if you so choose it to be, which is I don't know if you've ever played Elite Dangerous. I've played over 400 hours. Actually, no, I've played 600 hours of Elite Dangerous, something like that. It's a space sim type of game with a sandbox environment, and it does have multiplayer elements, but you can choose to play by yourself. And it's I just love the freedom that sandbox gave me. It was there's no main quest. The starting of the game is they just tell you, here's the ship, here's a couple of space stations we recommend you go to quest in because it's easier for you and it's a protected area, so no player's going to mess with you if you're playing multiplayer. But go do your thing. Go do whatever you want. And that's kind of like how I learned it. And that's what I wanted out of New World, right? I wanted to just unleash me into this world and let me do whatever the hell I want. I think that would have been cooler, but they did the theme park thing, so I'll go do the theme park thing. I'll probably in the final release, I'll do it even slower than I did in the beta, because in the beta you're like rushing through it to kind of like test systems and see stuff. But in the final release, I'm just gonna like, okay, I'm gonna just watch the story, play it slower than everybody else. I'm never gonna be the fastest one anyway with 2 kids, so whatever.
Yeah, with like a life and a family. I think that's why I think also New World excites me, because especially when I'm hoping that I can get it to run on my Steam Deck when it shows up next year, as a way of like, I'm just kind of chilling and playing and crafting and gathering, or just going out and killing and farming up mobs. At the end of the day, like I see New World as a great game that I can sit here and enjoy at my own pace, and I can either choose to be real hardcore about it and get involved in the PvP, but if life is busy, I can just log in and fish and chat and hang out, and it's and it is something that I truly have been, I've been following it for over 18 months, and it's really surreal that it's finally happening. And I think that it's going to help, I think, especially with kind of what's going on with all MMOs, that it's going to help fill in a gap that hasn't been served in a while. And the question is that will the community bully them into a game that they hate, which is essentially where they're coming from. Like, I see a lot of anger at WoW, and it's like, oh, this game doesn't do what WoW does. It doesn't have mounts. Like, well, if they add mounts, as long as they make sense in the game and the world. Like, I like how Guild Wars 2 implemented mounts. Like, mounts actually have
it is very well done.
Guild Wars 2 has I think the best mount system I've experienced.
The best mounts ever, yeah.
But they didn't start with mounts. And I think that's perfectly fine. And it's like, if New World adds mounts, that'd be great. I think ultimately, 2 things that I'd like to see when it comes to traversing this game. I'd like to see some form of like, horse and carriage shuttling you from city to city for a cost, so that you could sit here and ride and like you could manage your inventory. Yeah, like a Chocobo Porter, where it's going to travel you across the road. So you could like, okay, I got to go make a sandwich. I'm going to go ahead and have it, rather than auto running through mobs and, because the roads are, the roads. But it'd be nice to be able to kind of like, okay, I'm going to pay this fee, and then it's going to take me there in real time. It's not a teleport fee. It's like, yep, I'm going to have it ride me to that spot. I think that'd be nice, because then you could manage your inventory and do more things. I think the fact that you can't manage your inventory while you're traveling is a mistake, and hopefully they get that fixed, because that's the only thing you can't do. You can bring up map and quests, and you can read the journal, like everything you could be doing auto running, but as soon as you hit tab to bring up your inventory, your character stops, turns around, looks at the camera, and now you're in the inventory mode.
That was actually one of the things that I feel like Destiny did really well, is that when you were on that loading screen to go to a mission, you can just like mess around in your inventory and do stuff. And you even had like the app on your phone that would let you like grab stuff from your vault and push it into your character so that you can move stuff around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So at the end of the day, I hope people at least give some consideration to New World. I think that's one of the things we've been talking about. There's a lot of also exciting MMOs, and as this podcast is, really kind of an MMO focused, show in that regards, that multiplayer RPG, we talk about it all here. Obviously you'll be hearing lots of New World impressions and content coming from the show, and we hope that you enjoy it, that you subscribe to the audio version of the podcast, and you rate it 5 stars. There's other star ratings, but 5 stars means that,
it's the best one. I mean, how many fingers do you have in your hand? Do you have 4? Do you have 3? No, you have 5. That's how much you rate it. Oh no, I just realized. Oh no,
like I lost mine in a smelting incident.
my grandfather, who's now passed away a long time ago, he actually had like 2 fingers that he lost serving in the army. So the minute that came out of my mouth, I realized, oh no.
However many fingers and toes you have, that's the score. If you enjoyed the podcast,
exactly.
If you can count, you can rate. But I can't count, Brian.
Well, okay, look, we can't fix that one. I mean, we could, but it would take too long.
Well, hopefully this has been an informative episode for anybody who's like kind of curious about the show, and also the the game as it launches on the 28th. They have the times listed. It's actually going to be rolling out starting with the EU first. So be sure to go check out newworld.com if you want to go look at your map, or I've actually covered it in a video on Ginger Prime specifically, if you're curious. We have a company we're going to be rocking here on NA East on the Eden server. That's going to be where my main character is. Hopefully we won't have to call an audible on Tuesday. But that's the plan. If you want to be more a part of it, be sure to be a part of the Discord if you're going to be playing on NA East. Now, obviously you're excited about the game and you're over in the EU, so you're going to be playing it before I do. You announcing what server you're on?
Does it actually start earlier than in the US?
Yes. So EU, let me just pull up the times. We'll just read them out. EU servers launch actually on the 27th at 11 p.m. Pacific time. That's 8 a.m. CEST. I don't know what CEST is.
I have no idea what that is either.
Right. So it's like it's launching at that. Maybe this is all in sync, but it's the 27th of September 27th. This is 11 p.m. PT.
Like, at what time would it be for you?
So that would be on the 28th at 1 a.m. my time.
1 a.m. And for me, it was at 11 p.m. So that would be because we usually do the show at 11:30
Central,
which is 6 hours difference.
Yes.
So yes, Europe does start a couple of hours earlier by those calculations.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for me on Eastern, NA East, so South, it goes EU, South America, and Australia. And, and then essentially the NA East servers actually come up at 5 a.m. Pacific time, which would be 7 a.m. my time.
You know what they're doing? They're opening up the European servers earlier because they're just like, dude, if anything explodes, we'll hopefully fix it before we get to the US launch.
Thanks for running into the minefield first, Rory. Were there any mines? We haven't heard from Rory. He's down. Yeah. Watch out.
It's like my face shows up like all covered in soot, and I'm just like, oh my God, the things I've seen.
Oh, the horrors that I've witnessed. West launches at 8 a.m. Pacific time as well. So that goes South America looks like it's going to be at 4 a.m. Pacific time. Same thing for Australia. So South America and Australia servers launch at the same time. And they have other data centers and stuff that they were talking about spinning up as well. So honestly, at the end of the day, it's a pretty interesting thing. And if you have, and they basically in the announcement, they have an advertisement for Prime Gaming. If you have Prime Gaming, they're going to be doing drops for pirate stuff and cosmetics. So if you have your Amazon Prime and you got that hooked up to your Twitch, be sure to claim those rewards. And those are going to be dropping at launch and at like a couple of weeks into it. So just be keeping it locked. I'll try to keep people updated on the news. That I always kind of say I'll keep you updated on the news that I care about.
Exactly.
Like, are you a news channel? Like, if I care about it, but it's
if
like
I care about the news.
Well, right.
It's
like, hey guys, like I'll post in like as a part of the community. Like, it's like, hey, here's an update. Just here's some information if you need it. And then otherwise, like if it's a hot topic, then it's usually when somebody asks me like, hey, do you want to weigh in on this? It's like, no, but if you're asking, I'll go ahead and share my opinion. I could prune a couple subscribers because I'm sure, like, as I've been told, I definitely have an opinion that does not jive with popular thought all the time. Brian plays his MMO on controller. That jerk. We gotta get him. Unsubscribe.
Oh, man, dude. Controllers, if they would just like everybody would just copy Final Fantasy XIV controllers.
Amen,
so
brother.
Good.
Amen.
Just copy them. They haven't even patented it so that you can literally steal it. Just steal it. Steal it.
Take
I
it.
don't even care.
Run with it. Let's go. They got it. They figured it out. The nice thing is I do have a controller guide for New World. I have a uploaded profile on Steam. If you want to download it and you want to follow my lead on that, I'll be sure to keep you guys up to date. And they're said they're going to bring native controller support to the game itself. We're just going to have to, I guess, wait and see what that ends up looking like in the long run. So I'm excited for it. I think that's going to open it up to more places. So final thought is that it's only on PC for now. And there are no other announcements in that regard. So
I hope they bring it to consoles.
I think it'd be great. Yeah.
It's like, especially with the one, I think one of the biggest things that 14 has done really right is the fact that it is on PlayStation as well. And it should be on Xbox, hopefully at some point, because, you can just play with you have access to such a much bigger player base to keep the game alive, even if like, oh, the PC crowd is playing something else right now. That's okay. There's still the PlayStation crowd playing this, so that people on PC don't feel like the game is empty, and vice versa. PlayStation's playing this, PC's still coming back for something else. It's just better to have more people in your MMO. It's just a no-brainer.
Yeah. So at that note, we're, I think, at the end of the show itself. Hopefully we helped give you the information that you needed to know to jump into this game and have a good experience on the 28th. But at the same time, you can always wait, like Rory said, for reviews and see what people ultimately say about it. It's an MMO. I'm not expecting like people to come in and give it glowing reviews.
Oh,
yeah.
like,
I review 1,000 games. Now I review this MMO. Oh, it's usually the lines are like, it's an MMO. Like it's got lots of players. It's got quests. It's got fetch, it's got kill quests. But at the end of the day, it's going to be something I think pretty exciting. And hopefully you guys, if you're looking for a company, we got ours open. You can come join us. Have you picked your server yet? Do you want to share that before we sign off?
Nope. I haven't picked it up at all. So I need to look at the list and figure it out.
All right, guys. So thanks to everybody here who's on the live show with us. I really appreciate the support. Thanks to Chille for hitting that member button and helping fund these podcasts. Be sure to go and follow over on Epic Loot Radio, wherever podcasts are found. I hear a lot of people like the Spotify version. But you can find it pretty much anywhere. That's it for Brian and for Rory. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Hopefully we'll see you next week. But until then, take care.